You're about to hear something most people are never told. Not by their parents, not by their teachers, and certainly not by the polite voices that keep the world running on autopilot. What follows is not the story you grew up with. It isn't the bedtime comfort version of human nature. It isn't the sanitized classroom version. It's the version that powerful people whisper about while pretending in public that they would never think such thoughts. Once it's in your head, you cannot push it back out. It draws a line in your life. Before you understood it, and after. Half a millennium ago, a Florentine secretary named Niccolo Machiavelli wrote down truths that institutions have always found dangerous because they strip the mask off of how people actually behave. You've heard the pious speeches. You've seen the posters that tell you how the world should be. But the real handbook for human behavior is the one leaders hide inside their coat. They condemn it on the stage and study it behind the curtain. Ask yourself why you were never given it. Ask yourself who profits when you stumble around in the dark. It's not because the truth is cruel. It's because the truth gives power, and power shifts the ground under those who already hold it. The men and women who grasp this run, meetings you think are friendly and make moves you never even register. They are 10 steps ahead while you are still arguing about rules that exist only in the brochure. If you want to stop being a pawn, you start by dropping the fairy tale. You stop expecting reason to rule people who live by feeling. You stop believing that good intentions outmuscle leverage. And you stop confusing being liked with being respected. You have been sold a story that people think first and feel second. It sounds noble. It sounds safe. It lets you believe the right data will wake someone up. The airtight case will make them nod. The spreadsheet will carry the day. But people do not weigh truth on a scale. They taste it on the tongue. They choose the thing that feels right, and if the facts argue back, the facts get thrown out. A person will ask you for advice and then do the opposite because comfort is sweeter than honesty. A colleague will complain about money and then spend on tiny rituals because the small fix gives a drip of relief. A partner will say they want stability and then reach for the person who radiates risk because the pull beats the promise. The more charged the moment, the less logic matters. Fear, lust, status, belonging, convenience, those currents drag the boat and the compass sits in a drawer. So the first shift you make is brutal in its simplicity. You stop trying to win minds with evidence and you start moving hearts with feeling. You make people sense that you are right instead of proving that you are right. That is not a minor distinction. That is the difference between lecturing from a podium and commanding a room. The leader who shapes emotion doesn't need to shout. Presence does the pushing, story does the stitching, rhythm does the work. The world is full of bright people who can assemble charts. The world is ruled by those who can make a crowd lean forward and believe. History is not gentle about this. Every mass movement has ridden on the back of emotion. The ugliest rises to power were not engineered by perfect logic, but by finely tuned feelings. Corporations do not sell you molecules. They sell you a moment you want to be inside. Traditions don't spread by winning footnotes, but by lighting the inner theater of fear and hope. Every time you have walked out of a room thinking your flawless argument fell flat, you ran into this wall. You thought people were computers. They are weather. You brought numbers to a thunderstorm. The lesson is not to become cruel. The lesson is to stop bringing the wrong tool. You want someone to follow you. You give them a story about themselves that feels better than the one they are living. You want someone to stop disrespecting you. You let them feel the cost, not hear the lecture. You want a market to pick you. You don't recite features. You create the sense that you are the outcome they were already moving toward. The teacher wins debates. The king wins feelings. Once you accept that people steer by sensation, a darker realization arrives. If emotion rules the organism, then strength shapes the ecosystem. You can dress it in soft words, but the field stays the field. Strip away the etiquette and you are left with a pattern older than any law. Those who project strength set the terms. Those who signal softness without backbone end up paying the bill for other people's appetites. Weakness doesn't just fail to defend, it invites pressure. It is a scent in the water. The bully finds the quiet target because the response will be safe. The bureaucracy cuts the employee who won't push back. The dating market moves away from the man who doubles over to please and toward the man who can hold a line because a line means safety when it matters. This is not about cruelty. It's about signal. Your posture tells the room whether it can take from you. Your voice tells the room whether it can lean on you. Your choices tell the room whether it has to ask permission. That is why a display of strength is not a luxury. It is insurance. Without it, even people who like you will not trust you in the moments that count. You were likely told to be agreeable. The adults said you would be rewarded for not rocking the boat. They confused avoiding friction with building value. Nice is not the same as good. Nice is a surface. Nice is a strategy that hopes approval will substitute for respect. Good is different. Good can be kind and still set boundaries. Good can be generous and still say no. Good can offer forgiveness without offering a second chance to someone who keeps violating the deal. The truth that burns through polite myths is this: approval is a poor protection. People admire backbone even when they pretend they don't. They gather behind the one who looks like they can carry weight. They test the edges of the one who looks like they will push back. When decisions get heavy, charm evaporates and strength decides. The executives promoted for their warmth seldom keep the seat if they wilt when hard calls come due. The partners adored for being low conflict often get sidelined when the storm hits. Strength with kindness magnetizes. Weakness with niceness contaminates. You don't chase being liked. You build a strong reputation that settles the question before it's asked. Now take the word loyalty. You were told it was golden. You were told it would save you if you gave it freely and forever. But loyalty without limit is a leash tied to your own ankle. If the bond is not reciprocal, it isn't noble. It's a drain. The friend who only appears when they need something teaches you the shape of the contract. The company that chants family in one breath and counts heads in the next teaches you the shelf life of slogans. The partner who demands commitment while keeping escape routes shows you the structure of their promise. A powerful person doesn't cling to loyalty that isn't earned. They test. They watch what people do when there's nothing to gain. They notice who shows up in the cold, not only on festival days. They make it a deal, not a sentimental haze. And when the deal is violated, they do not argue about feelings. They change the terms or end the contract. Loyalty worth giving is loyalty that stands when the wind shifts. Loyalty worth keeping is loyalty tested in quiet times and confirmed in pressure. Once you understand that, you see why your reputation is the armor other people meet before they meet you. You can be brilliant, generous, capable, and still be dismissed if your name does not carry the right shadow in front of you. People do not have the time or the access to know your interior. They rely on the outline you project. That outline is not everything, but it is what opens doors or closes them. The person who overshares under the banner of authenticity, who spills doubts and wounds into every room, walks out puzzled when their influence shrinks. They think bearing everything should earn trust. In practice, it often earns concern and distance. Strategic authenticity is different. You share the parts that strengthen your position and you hold the parts that invite unnecessary risk. You solve in public and bleed in private. You make your availability scarce enough to imply value, not so scarce that you become a ghost. You make your decisions without long explanations to people who aren't on the hook for those decisions. You keep the fire of your reputation trimmed, so it warms your allies and warns your enemies without setting you on fire. Once the glass of your name cracks, it is agony to mend. That is why you guard it like you guard your savings. A dent in your bank account can be repaired. A dent in your name keeps echoing long after you patch the surface. Even with a disciplined reputation, you will not be spared conflict. You don't schedule conflict. It arrives on its own clock. The room is quiet until it isn't. The whispers stay whispers until they are knives. The competitor smiles until your back is turned. You either go through life hoping peace will hold, or you accept that tension is the baseline, and preparation is the way you keep your balance. If you treat every calm morning like a gift of time, you use it to sharpen. You set aside cash before you need it. You keep your body ready so you are not starting from zero in the week you cannot miss. You cultivate allies in ordinary days so you don't scramble when the weather changes. You become a fox in the sensing and a lion in the doing, sharp to see traps and strong enough to make the trap setter regret the attempt. People who lean only on cleverness get peeled apart by blunt force. People who lean only on force get walked into holes they never noticed. When you look like someone who is already prepared to finish what others start, you often won't be tested at all. Predators prefer easier prey. Readiness deters in silence. Control shows up as calm. There is another lesson people resist because it bumps against the story they want about themselves. They want to think promises are sacred objects that must never be broken, no matter how the ground shifts. They want to think pure honesty always wins longer than strategy. In the wild, nothing stays sacred for its own sake. Leaders keep promises that preserve strength and break promises that would wreck the mission. That isn't an invitation to become a liar. It's a demand to understand that rigid vows can be a trap built by yesterday's self. The wiser move is precision. You tell the truth when truth amplifies your position. You withhold or redirect when transparency would hand ammunition to someone eager to use it against you. You end commitments that now cost you your survival or your soul. Your enemies are already doing this. Your rivals are already doing this. The world is already applying selective candor. If you refuse to learn the same maneuvers, you get treated as a soft target. The point is not to drip deceit. The point is to master the mask and the reveal, to speak flatly when clarity helps, and to stay still when silence is the strongest weapon in the room. Silence deserves special attention because it is one of the few tools that grows more effective the less you use it. People who live by noise fear silence. They throw accusations and hope you chase each one. If you chase, you look smaller with every breath you spend. When you refuse to defend yourself against potshots from those who don't deserve an answer, you force them to talk to their own echo. They begin to look unsteady. They begin to repeat themselves. They begin to search for louder ways to get a rise out of you. Meanwhile, your stillness reads as composure. Your control reads as higher ground. The more you explain, the more lonely you look. The less you explain, the more untouchable you feel. Precision phrases can slice a conflict cleanly, short assertions that end the exchange without inviting a debate. But the backbone of those phrases is the discipline not to be dragged into theater. A powerful person understands that absence is an action. Not answering is not the same as having nothing to say. It is choosing the channel where you cannot be manipulated. If you're beginning to notice the pattern, it goes like this. Average behavior plays to the crowd, chases approval, resists discomfort, and dies by 1,000 small concessions. Strategic behavior builds presence, chooses leverage over sentiment, accepts discomfort as the price of sovereignty, and refuses to bleed out through needless reactions. This does not make you cruel. It makes you clear. It makes you harder to bait. It makes you less available for other people's laziness. It makes you a person whose boundaries are understood without a speech. There are people who will call this arrogance because your calm exposes their agitation. There are people who will call this manipulative because your refusal to be steered ruins their favorite tricks. Let them talk. Your job is not to guide every opinion. Your job is to build a life where your standards shape the space around you instead of living in rooms where you whisper apologies for having any standards at all. When you start living this way, the air around you changes. You become less frantic. You waste fewer words. You say no more quickly. You spend more time on work that compounds and less on keeping up with people who never intend to meet you where you are. The constant need to defend yourself falls away because you recognize that defense is a show other people asked you to perform for their benefit. Your attention returns to your mission. Your schedule becomes a wall with doors you control. You stop trying to fix those who profit from staying broken. You stop selling patience to those who treat your time like a junk drawer. You stop believing that you owe access to everyone who asks. You begin to treat your energy like currency in a country where inflation never stops. And you stop pretending that every conflict requires an answer in the moment it appears. Most attacks wilt if you give them nothing to drink. Most traps fail if you are already looking for them. Most storms pass if you have already built a solid roof. Power is not in shouting, it is in shaping the weather inside you so the outside storm can't knock you off your feet. That's the doorway we are standing in now. On one side is the comfortable myth that the world will reward your good heart if you just keep proving it. On the other side is the reality that results come from understanding incentives, emotions, signals, and leverage, and then acting on that understanding without apology. If you step through, you will see every grin as a move, every promise as a position, every public virtue as a tactic someone might be using for reasons that have nothing to do with you. That awareness can make you cynical if you wear it the wrong way. It can also make you calm if you treat it like a map. You are not required to play dirty to stop being naive. You are required to stop being easy to use. You are required to stop mistaking noise for truth. You are required to stop asking people who benefit from your confusion to tell you how to live. You can be fair without being soft. You can be generous without being a doormat. You can be peaceful while being ready for war. You can carry warmth and still be the last person anyone wants to cross. That combination is rare. That combination is what lifts you above the petty theater and makes accusations burn out before they reach you. That is immunity, not merely toughness. And once you build it, people Feel it first and ask questions later. You build this kind of composure the same way a craftsman builds a blade, not by wishing for it, but by hammering out the weak metal, quenching the steel, and testing it against real resistance until it holds an edge. Start with your reactions. The next time someone tries to drag you into a messy exchange, an accusatory email, a cruel comment said as a joke, a public nudge designed to get you flustered, you do not sprint onto their stage. You pause, you breathe, you check the scoreboard. What do you gain by performing? What do you lose by letting them burn out under their own noise? Then you choose the move that advances your position. Sometimes that looks like a single sentence that closes the tab. I'm focused on the outcome, not the argument. Sometimes it looks like a calm redirect that returns the spotlight to results. We'll measure this by delivery on Friday. Sometimes it is simply letting the moment pass and allowing their neediness to expose itself. A person desperate for you to react will not look stable when you don't. You will be told that this kind of restraint is passive. It isn't. It is a deliberate refusal to donate energy to traps. It is the discipline of guarding your attention as if it were gold. Look at the people who spend their days in replies and comment wars. They rarely build anything that outlasts the quarrel. Contrast that with the person who never raises their voice, rarely posts, and shows up with a finished outcome when deadlines arrive. One looks busy. The other accumulates quiet authority. Authority is not loud. Authority is a chair that is already in the center of the room when the crowd stops yelling and asks, "So who's actually in charge?" You don't get that seat by talking. You get it by choice after choice that proves you won't be moved by gusts. Stillness does not mean softness. It means you decide when to strike, where to strike, and whether striking is even necessary. Consider the coworker who keeps taking credit for your work in subtle ways. The average person calls them out in a meeting and makes the room awkward while weakening their own image. The strategic person collects evidence, loops in the right witness once, and, at a time of their choosing, presents the facts without heat. A single, well-timed reveal closes a pattern that 100 heated disputes never would. Or consider the online critic who lives to pull you into a mud fight. The average response is a paragraph of defense. The strategic response is no response, followed days later by a post that demonstrates competence so cleanly it makes the critic look petty without you ever typing their name. Absence can do more than presence when presence gives your opponent free rent. People will accuse you of dodging. They will say you're cold. They will say you think you're better than others. What they mean is your calm refuses their favorite leverage, which is dragging you into their rhythm. Their rhythm is panic. Your rhythm is measured. When someone tries to pace you up, you deliberately pace down. You talk slower. You make fewer gestures. You let silence sit between sentences until they feel it. You watch how quickly anxious people fill that silence with giveaways. They tell you what they want. They tell you where they're afraid. They confess by trying to control the tempo. This is not cruelty. It is listening. The person who controls tempo controls interpretation. When you slow the moment, you force reality to catch up to rhetoric. Beyond silence, there are precision cuts, short statements that don't defend, don't explain, and don't return fire, but end the exchange. Used rarely, they carry weight. A colleague tries to bait you. "Why are you being so quiet? Guilty?" You reply, "Confident." Not a speech, a verdict. A friend of a friend pushes boundaries and says you owe them access. "We're all transparent here, right?" You say, "No." You want these phrases to be exact, brief, unadorned. Facts about your stance, not threats, not apologies, not flares for a bigger fight. They communicate that your time is not an open market and your name is not a public square. They set the size of the room. In a world where everyone is auditioning, the person who doesn't audition stands out. Reframing is another instrument. Someone paints your confidence as arrogance. You don't argue. You say, "Some call it arrogance. My team calls it responsibility." Someone sneers that you're calculating. You don't deny it. You say, "Yes, I calculate the cost before I commit." The point is not to win a debate. The point is to shift the frame so that the trait they weaponized now signals strength. In social groups, the crowd instinctively follows frames that reduce uncertainty. When you turn an accusation into a story of steadiness, you give the room a simpler choice: align with reliability or align with noise. Most people choose reliability, even if their ego wishes it could choose otherwise. Redirection is for those moments when an attack is really a plea for validation. In a public setting, a rival tries a sly insult to get laughs. You don't bite. You look at the audience and re-anchor the conversation. Anyway, what matters is who delivers the result this week. You are not ignoring them. You are denying them the arena they wanted. If they try again, you do it again until the room learns that you don't reward antics with attention. Over time, this reputation accumulates. People stop trying the cheap shots because they don't pay. They move on to easier marks. You didn't have to win. You had to be too expensive to fight. You might wonder, isn't this exhausting? At first, yes. Training any new posture is work, but exhaustion comes from reacting constantly, not from choosing wisely. Flailing is tiring. Discipline is efficient. Once you have a handful of stock responses, once your default is silence until you choose otherwise, once your schedule reflects your priorities rather than the world's emergencies, the energy you save starts to fund your real advances. You look around and realize you've stopped living in other people's storms. You built a climate. Reputation sits at the center of all of this. You are not trying to be liked. You are building a name that walks ahead of you and settles questions without needing your mouth. A good reputation, the one that says you're easy, kind, endlessly flexible, gets you invites to carry other people's loads. A strong reputation, the one that says you're composed, exact, and accountable, gets you deference when it counts. The first makes you popular on sunny days and disposable in a crunch. The second makes you the call people make when it matters. The difference is not just what you do, it is how you do it consistently. The person who arrives early, speaks briefly, delivers what was promised, and leaves without lingering creates a myth of reliability. The person who arrives late, overshares, overpromises, and stays to manage optics creates a myth of need. Myths are sticky. People trust their story about you more than the details of a single day. Be ruthless about which story you are feeding. Use examples to train your instincts. In the office, a senior leader asks for a last-minute change that would derail your team. The average. You nods, suffers, and hopes to be seen as cooperative. The strategic you says, calmly, we can do this by moving X to next sprint, or we can keep our current scope and ship on schedule. Which outcome do you want? You don't refuse. You present trade-offs, you make them choose costs. Suddenly the pressure recedes from you and sits where it belongs, on the requester's priorities. In a relationship, a partner makes a public jab to score points with friends. The average you laughs to keep things smooth and resents it later. The strategic. You lets the moment go by and then, in private, states a boundary without a negotiation. Jokes at my expense aren't part of us. If it happens again, I'll walk away from the scene. No threats, no drama, just a line. Online, a stranger demands an apology for a stance you never took. The average you writes paragraphs explaining. The strategic you writes nothing and keeps building, because you don't owe your weekends to people who collect outrage like hobby stamps. At some point, someone will genuinely misunderstand you in good faith. Here, too, the posture holds. You can clarify without defending. I can see how you read it that way. What I meant is X. If it still doesn't work for you, we can part ways respectfully. Notice the spine in that sentence. It treats the other person as an adult. It assumes no endless debate. It offers resolution, not court. This is how you prevent a misread from becoming a drag on your attention for days. Most fires die quickly when they meet a calm boundary and a path out. Powerfully quiet people also engineer their environment to reduce unnecessary friction. You pick the rooms you enter. You don't stay in circles where gossip is the currency. You pick projects where outcomes can be measured. You avoid arenas designed to inflame. You rotate what you tolerate. The easiest way to look invincible is to stop volunteering for arenas that feed on defensiveness. You cannot look untouchable while standing in a ring that pays fighters per punch. Leave the ring. There is a moral anxiety that often surfaces here. People ask, isn't all this just image management? Isn't it playing games? The answer is that everything humans do in groups has a performative layer. Even saying, I'm above performance is a performance that claims the status of purity. The question is not whether there is theater. The question is whether you are running the script or being run by someone else's. The person who pretends their words have no effect is often the person whose words are wielded against them. Owning your image is not the same as faking your soul. In fact, it allows you to protect your soul. When you stop performing for strangers, you can give the real you to those who have earned it. Boundaries are not walls. They are gates. and gates are for those with permission. A crucial distinction: explanations versus standards. Explanations tell the world why you deserve space. Standards quietly assume the space and behave accordingly. Explanations multiply. Standards compress. The more you explain yourself, the more you signal that your position depends on convincing. The more you uphold standards, the more you signal that your position depends on reality. Set your meeting lengths. Set your communication windows. Set your deliverable definitions. Then live them. You don't warn people. You show them repeatedly until it becomes part of your silhouette. Most of what looks like charisma is actually the comfort others feel when they can predict your boundaries. This brings us to promises. A promise is a plan made under conditions that may not survive contact with time. The average way to handle this is to treat the promise as sacred even when reality has changed. The strategic way is to treat the mission as sacred and update the plan when needed. If you must adjust a commitment, you do it before the deadline, not after. You present the new path with clarity and own the cost. You do not perform guilt. You demonstrate control. Here's the updated route. Here's what it costs me. Here's what it protects for us. People may grumble. Let them. The result is a record of leadership that adapts without panicking. This is how you can break from yesterday's sentence while keeping respect today. Another lever: distance. Seen correctly, distance is not avoidance. It's perspective. When a situation starts to spin, you step back and widen the frame. Ask, if I do nothing, what happens? If I give oxygen, what grows? If I escalate, what changes? The answer often reveals that inaction is not passivity, it is selection. You are selecting what to build. Every reaction is a small construction project. Do you want to build this? The person who doesn't ask that question ends up living in a city of other people's architectures, wandering streets they didn't choose, complaining about the view. The person who asks it lives in a home they designed. Part of designing that home is who gets a key. You control access, not rudely, not with grand announcements, but with quiet rules. You don't open your calendar to people who have repeatedly wasted your time. You don't keep chats with those who can't hold confidentiality. You don't return to groups where status games undermine the work. You steadily raise the floor of what you tolerate. People will accuse you of being closed off. What they mean is you stopped being available for exploitation. Paradoxically, as you tighten access, the quality of your interactions improves. Real allies find you. Real partners stay. Real opportunities knock because they can see you deliver without the haze of chaos. If all of this sounds like a heavy lift, understand what sits on the other side. A reputation so steady that hostile words crumble before they land. A presence so consistent that others think twice before taking liberties. An interior life so quiet that you hear your own judgment without the static of strangers. This is the immunity you're building. Not a shield that never gets scratched, but a system that absorbs shocks and keeps moving in the direction you chose. Now consider long-term games. Power compounds like money when you reinvest it. The more you practice silence, the more your circle adapts to your pace. The more you practice precise language, the less people try to twist it. The more you practice distance, the more you see patterns early and choose only the battles that matter. Over a year, that means fewer feuds and more finished work. Over 5 years, that means a name that moves ahead of you. Over a decade, that means doors open with a single email. Most rivals burn out running from fight to fight. You are still here, rested, focused, and very difficult to knock off course. People call it luck. It is design. There will be crises you cannot avoid. In those moments, you do not abandon your posture. You intensify it. You speak less, not more. You make decisions faster, not slower. You take responsibility for your lane and refuse to own chaos that belongs to someone else. You anchor to your standards like a pilot anchors to instruments in a storm. And when you come out the other side, you do a quiet autopsy. What signal did I send that invited this? What boundary was missing? What relationship needs to end? Then you adjust the architecture. You don't swear off people. You update the lock. There is a final paradox I want you to carry. The more you insist on being understood, the smaller you become. The more you accept being misread by those who don't matter, the larger you get to be for those who do. The person who tries to manage every perception spends their life in defense. The person who cultivates presence and lets the excess chatter pass spends their life in creation. It is better to be a mystery with momentum than an open book with no pages left to write. You will not win by convincing everyone. You will win by building something undeniable and standing so calmly beside it that those who doubt you begin to doubt themselves. So the next time you feel the tug to answer, explain, justify, plead, correct, perform, pause. Ask yourself if the urge is a habit or a strategy. Ask if the person pulling is someone who has earned the right to your energy. Ask whether silence would make them reveal what they don't want seen. Ask whether a single sentence would set the perimeter. Ask whether distance would make the truth clearer, and then do the thing that strengthens your position, not the thing that feeds your anxiety. Remember, your existence can be the statement. You owe no encore to an audience that didn't buy a ticket. You are not a defendant. You are a builder. Build so well that words become optional. From here on, your task is simple in shape and difficult in practice. When you enter a room, bring your own weather. When you speak, let it be brief and exact. When you are attacked, make others pay to reach you. When you promise, protect the mission above the sentence. When you're tempted to react, choose from your 3 tools: silence, a precise assertion, or a reframed truth, and then return to the work. Over time, you will notice a change. The volume around you lowers. The quality of your deals rises. The tests get rarer, not because the world got kind, but because you trained it to see you correctly. That is the hidden truth people don't teach in school. You don't win by wrestling every hand that reaches for you. You win by becoming the person whose stance makes the wrong hands withdraw.